Thank you all for joining us. So Jaclyn Friedman, I'm very excited to have this conversation. Just a quick WMC talks overview. We have these talks really to give people the opportunity, experts, people who are working out in the world on critical issues, to share some of their experiences and insights, particularly media framing insights in ways that and with information that might not make it into mainstream forums. And who better to do this when it comes to sex education than Jaclyn Friedman? Full transparency, I've known Jaclyn for many years now. We have collaborated on many campaigns over that time. Jaclyn is currently the executive director of EducateUS, which is a new organization, relatively, although not so new anymore.
We're almost 5 now.
It's almost 5 years, which I'm going to let her explain. But she's a longtime advocate, lifelong activist, and remarkable author. So you should look up all of her books. The first one was Yes Means Yes, Visions of Female Sexual Power in a World Without Rape, which was one of Publishers Weekly's top 100 books in 2009, which she co-authored with Jessica Valenti. And that book alone inspired many new laws around the country, and continues to inspire policies on college campuses, and also very controversial policies on college campuses in this country and elsewhere. And Jaclyn also spearheaded with Laura Bates and I a campaign called the Facebook Rape Campaign that was dedicated to Facebook in particular, but then more broadly other platforms, recognizing the force of misogyny, intersectional misogyny on their platforms. And with that introduction, I really want to turn this over to Jaclyn with the starting question, which is, what do you think is really missing in national conversations about sex ed? Maybe give us a little background about Educate Us to answer that question. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think sex ed is missing from international
Mhm.
conversations about sex ed. I feel like we just don't talk about it enough.
Mhm.
I think that a lot of people don't think it affects them
Mm.
because they have a much too narrow idea of what it is and what it does.
Mhm.
So I created sex ed after a career doing anti-sexual violence advocacy, as we talked about. Um, uh, because I got involved here in Massachusetts in trying to get a bill passed, honestly, an inadequate bill here in Massachusetts,
Uh-huh.
to improve sex ed in the state, and ran it. I discovered we were up against a buzzsaw here even here in Massachusetts. You know, we'd passed the Senate multiple times, but the leadership of the House has just never brought it to the House floor for a vote, even though it's wildly popular.
Right.
And they can do that because nobody votes on sex ed. There's not enough sex ed voters to turn
Right.
from office because they're not taking action on sex ed. And I just thought there's so much agreement on what good sex ed is and what good it does. Not a
Mhm.
lot of knowledge, and we'll talk about that. But there's so little of it happening in our public schools,
Mhm.
and because we don't have any movement power behind it. And so I started Educate Us to build that movement that will be strong enough to force change so that we can get to universal K through 12 sex education in every public school in this country.
Right. And I think that even the term sex ed voter is new to people, right?
I
Like,
made it up. Yeah.
you made it up, and it was an important phrase to make up, because we have talked about this over the years, but sex ed really is most people in schools first direct exposure to civics, in fact, to free speech, to diversity, to people having autonomy, to learning to respect other people and their dignity. So I think when you say sex ed voter, it maybe still sounds a little like abstract because it's an issue, but can you talk about the connection between those things?
Yeah. So when we talk about sex ed traditionally, we stay on this right-wing framing, right? So
Mhm.
all the debate winds up happening about pregnancy prevention and disease prevention.
Right. Scary stuff. All this bad. It's bad,
Yeah,
scary.
all this negative stuff,
Mhm.
and it's like fear-based, and it's also like, well, of course we would never want to teach kids actually about sex. Like we just want to prevent these terrible outcomes. And when we
Mhm.
like that, we keep it this individualized idea. And most parents think, oh, my kid's not going to get in that kind of trouble. And
Mm.
who don't have kids of that age think, well, this doesn't apply to me. When in fact, what we know is sex education, the kind that you and I are talking about,
Mhm.
really does create better community members, better citizens, right?
Right, better citizens.
Yeah, we know that it decreases bullying,
Mhm.
and victimization. And not only that, but it increases bystander intervention. So it increases the odds that kids who've had it will intervene if they see another kid being attacked.
Right.
Um, it decreases belief in patriarchal
Mhm.
systems. It increases academic performance, but it
Mhm.
also increases young people's ideas that their body and their lives are their own,
Right.
but also that applies to everybody else around them. So it increases acceptance of and respect for people who are different. And these are all the fundamental building
Right.
blocks of the society that we want to be living in.
And
Um,
yeah, and also the right to hear. Not free speech is the right to speak, but also the right to get the information.
Yes,
Yeah.
but not only that, but we find that sex ed on a more practical level, if you're talking about civics, is an issue that gets young people excited about voting,
Mhm.
right? Like there are a lot of young people who, for perfectly legitimate reasons, are skeptical about how much it's going to matter if they vote for president or
Right.
other things up ballot. I think they should vote for them on those elections personally, but like I get why it's a tough case at the moment for some people.
Mhm.
When you tell young people you could be voting in your school board election and that will affect what kind of sex ed you and your peers get,
Mm.
uh, much better sell. Um,
Did,
and
oh,
and
go
you
ahead. Sorry.
build that civic engagement on the local level, then you build that habit and that attitude for life.
Did you see this recent uh, episode where a young woman was talking to a local, I think it was a school board. Was it a school board?
It sure was a school board member,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And he commented on her appearance.
And she was like, I want to say she was 10.
Yeah, she was very young. And
Yes.
then he wasn't ousted. And then she stood and criticized them for not ousting him, but I think that if that man had had maybe better sex ed, he
Well, this
might
is what
not,
I'm always
you know.
saying. We need to think bigger. What if
Right.
the Supreme Court had
Oh,
confidential
I know.
evidence, right?
Yes.
What if our politicians had? What if our judges had? What if our
Right.
doctors had? Right? All the people who make decisions about our bodies
Our
and our
bodies. Yes.
need this education. And that's
Mhm.
why we should be having a conversation about sex ed that's about social impact and not just about individual impact.
So let's go back to the scapegoating of certain people in the society by politicians and a survey that you just did about sex ed, which shows
Sure.
overwhelming support. So can you talk about the survey? Because I feel it deserves a lot more airtime.
Yes, I do too. I
Yes.
absolutely do too.
Yes. So
And
can you talk
and
about that
relative
survey?
to media, like we have had trouble. We have not
Yeah.
gotten any mainstream media outlets, any major media outlets to cover it. We've been getting people who have Substacks, people who have
Right.
Instagram lives like yours. There are a lot of people in our world talking about
Mhm.
in terms of getting like the media infrastructure interested in covering
Right.
this story, which is a real story. Like
So
as
let give us the top line because I know how important it is.
yeah. So we did some polling. We did it twice because the results were so eye-popping that we wanted to make sure to be confident that
Mhm.
they were real. We first time did it with Voss Strategies and then the second time did it with YouGov.
Mhm.
And what we found is that not only are super majorities of Americans in favor of sex ed in schools, just like huge, like 75% of the country, right? Big numbers.
Mhm.
But when you tell people specifically that it is trans inclusive, that it is inclusive and affirming of transgender students, it does not decrease support. So super,
Regardless of political affiliation, which I think
regard. I
is
mean,
the
look, there are some subdemographics where there is a small decrease, but you still
Mhm.
see huge majorities, right? So,
Right.
52% of people who get their news from Fox support trans inclusive sex education.
Right.
And
Which
think
is
about what,
amazing.
which is
Right.
amazing, right? If we think about conservatives, if we think about people who identify as born again, People who go very regularly to church. These are all categories of people where there's a solid majority support for
Right.
trans use of the sex ed specifically. And not only that, but we, on the second poll, because we wanted to give context and make sure we weren't getting some sort of blip, asked a couple of additional questions about whether schools should be welcoming and inclusive for trans students generally,
Broadly, that's
whether
right.
whether schools should protect trans students from discrimination, which is like an active obligation, right? And we saw the same results with, slightly different numbers, but more directionally the exact same result. The right has spent untold millions of dollars, aided and abetted by outlets like the New York Times, I will just say out loud,
Yeah.
to try and make this country hate trans kids. And we just don't. We just
Right.
do not. And we
Well,
don't
and
do sex
yeah.
ed. Everyone is for it.
And you would think, given the last several years, right, really and truly, that that would be news. So I'm so happy you're here talking to us about
Yeah.
this today.
I'm
Um,
so happy
so
that you have me here to talk about it because I'm trying to like yell it into the
yeah,
wind.
yeah. No, it's important, but I think too, there are lots of ways that people are thinking about creating friction in society, fighting against authoritarianism, thinking about creeping fascism, not so creeping fascism, blunt force fascism. And can you talk about sex ed as a bulwark against that? Because any authoritarian fascist regime starts off with scapegoating, starts off with minority groups that it can harm more easily. And it just seems to me that turning sex ed into a voting issue,
Yeah,
I don't want to say it's a Trojan horse or a back door, but it's so important.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The way you know that sex ed is fundamental to democracy is that forces that are anti-democratic come for sex ed immediately, right?
Immediately.
Every authoritarian regime has come out of the gate trying to control both public education
Hmm.
and sex, gender, and reproduction.
Right.
And sex ed is
Together.
at the intersection of those two things, right?
Right.
And those are two of the main levers of control that authoritarians use to try and
Hmm.
divide us, keep us ignorant, keep us isolated from each other, and make us easily manipulable, which is what we
Right.
need to be in order to be controlled by them. Sex ed teaches young people how to have healthy relationships with,
Hmm.
right, how to communicate, how to build relationships across difference,
Hmm.
um, how like fundamentally
How
also
to respect other people.
that
Basic
our lives
respect.
are ours
Right.
and everybody else is people too, right?
Hmm.
uh, Fundamental, you can't teach sex ed without these fundamental lessons. It's not sex ed, in my opinion, without these
Right.
lessons. And that is why the authoritarians come for it. And we've seen, like, this is the second year Trump has come out with a budget that zeroes out all funding for sex education.
Hmm.
We last year, because of this Congress's inability to do anything, they actually didn't cut sex ed funding. They just level funded it because they had to get a bunch
Right.
of stuff back. But we don't know that that's going to hold. They're trying to cut it. They're trying to take all content related to LGBTQ people out of the curriculum, which certainly makes it impossible to teach sex ed.
Hmm.
They're trying to ban the books that we need to teach sex ed. They're trying to call it DEI. They also have instituted more funding to incentivize schools to teach um, what I don't call abstinence sex education. I call it abstinence propaganda because it's not
Yeah.
sex
It is. It's not
education.
sex ed. I just remember the chastity bear. That's all
Yeah.
I can think of.
So we are, and on the state level, we're also seeing, gosh, I don't know if you've already talked about it on one of these, but the Heritage report that came
Yes.
earlier this year.
2026 plan, you mean?
Yes, their
Mhm.
Project 2026 fundamentally.
Right.
It's called Reclaiming America by Reclaiming
Yes.
Family or something like that. And their plan out loud, these are the people who wrote Project
Yes. Yes.
2025. This is
Yes.
what we are living through right now. Out loud, their plan is get women to stop getting higher education and
Oh, absolutely.
get out of the workforce. I think ideally don't even finish high school and just start having babies and as
Had
young as
babies.
possible. And they're
Right.
literally saying that the problem with women getting too much education is that they're having babies too late.
Well,
Um,
yeah, that's the population crisis. Sort of, again, I think propaganda. I understand the population crisis concerns, but really this idea that teenagers should be getting pregnant as soon as possible
Yeah.
is obscene. Like
Teenage girls, let's be
teenage girls,
because
teenage girls with older men.
they're also pushing this thing that I want everyone who watches or listens to this to know about called success sequencing.
Mm,
And this is this discredited idea from the 90s that there's an order in which you can do things and then you won't be poor. And the
right,
order that they say that is you graduate from high school, you get a job, then you get married, then you have a baby. And the
mhm,
idea also means, because of course, no, they don't want you to have an abortion, like you don't have sex,
right,
get married. Now, of course, they only mean that for boys because for girls, they just mean get married and have a baby, skip
right.
education and
Skip
job.
the education.
They
That's right.
don't care. But also, that whole sequence is a lie. Like it's discredited research. It at best confuses correlation and causation, right? Like
Hmm.
wealthier, better off people can do that sequence in that order easier than other people.
Right.
But also the researchers found that the only two things that correlate is like, do you have a job before you have a baby?
Mm.
Then you're less likely to be poor, which makes sense.
Right. They will never talk about the precarity
Yeah.
for the people having the
Yeah.
babies. Like that just doesn't factor into the equation.
So
Um,
as you can imagine, young women, especially having sex education, knowing their rights, knowing how to access contraception and abortion,
mhm.
know set boundaries and say what we want instead of just what a guy who might be interested in us wants. All of that stuff really undermines that agenda.
Well, and what I think is interesting, again, I don't want to sort of harp on it, but I think it's so important, in fact, for the media to understand
Yes.
is how the survey that the research that you have really contradicts myths about the polarization of people when it comes to these topics.
It is astonishing. Not only do we have majorities over
Hmm.
of their base after they spent all that money, but if you look at Democrats, left-leaning folks,
Hmm.
moderates, it's even bigger numbers. We're looking at 80%, we're looking at
Right.
90%. So leaders who are not MAGA, right? um, should be this is a wedge issue that we should be using, right? Like this is an
Right.
issue that even many conservatives agree on.
Yeah,
Uh
and I mean,
yeah,
it's a bridge building issue, in fact. No one,
yeah.
I think, thinks of it that way, but it is clearly a bridge building.
Yes, absolutely. And it should be used as such. And instead, the political class has become convinced, and I think the journalists along with them, and this is because of decades of right wing propaganda
Yes.
on uncontested, that it is the third rail, which
Yes.
our polling shows is just not true. And if folks are looking for it, if you're on Instagram, if you go to Educate Us Action and just scroll down a little, you can see the
Hmm.
infographics. And but you can also go to educateUSaction.org, go to the resources page, and it'll be the top button on the resources page. You can see all the polling.
Right.
Um, and I want that to, in case there are journalists listening, I want
Yes, yes.
people to go see the numbers. We're happy to talk to you. But yeah, the media class and the political class are convinced because the right has been waging a one-sided culture war on this issue for literal decades
Decades. It has been decades. And
since
yes.
Reagan. And the left generally, or even just moderate, like non
Hmm.
right people, have been so afraid of being targeted as uh oh, you want kids to have sex, right? Like
Right.
so afraid that instead of just standing up and being like, no, of course that's not what any of this is about, you weirdo. Like, here's what it is about. Instead of just standing in our power,
Right.
like we've been running scared on this issue indefinitely.
Well, I think just listening to you, though, it's very clear. I imagine that most people, because it's not on their radar in the ways we're talking about, don't understand what it means to zero out the budget, right? Like that's going to impact their schools, their children, their families significantly. And it's
Yeah.
not until it's not available, I think, that people, it's not
Yeah.
until,
And I
that
think it's
people
just like
understand
Dobbs,
it.
right? There were so many people before Dobbs that said, oh, they'll never do that. Abortion
Oh,
won't
right.
be
I know.
legal. Like you're being hysterical. And now that people miss having abortion access,
Hmm. That's
um,
right.
they're outraged,
But
rightly so. Yeah.
it's interesting. I remember actually when we first met, and I had just written an article pointing out the correlation between abstinence-only sex ed funding and spikes in bullying in schools, right? We like that sometimes the correlations are so high that it ceases to be a question, right? I mean, it's not, you cannot prove it. But in fact, as you said, if there is good sex ed, bullying goes down. All kinds of bullying goes down.
And
And you would
not just that, but kids stick up for each other.
kids,
Bystander
right.
bullying goes down. Yeah.
They actively intervene and stick up for each other, which is even more critical, I think, today given online environments, right?
Yes.
We want people to be able to understand those dynamics, to identify those dynamics. So we have about 5 or 6 minutes left, and I'd really love to close on what so assuming now we're telling people this information is there, hopefully more people will gain access to it. But what do you think consumers of information, politicians, people as voters can do? What can they be doing about this issue in their own communities and lives?
Yeah.
Aside
So
from, as a journalist, obviously writing about it, sharing the information online,
yeah.
etc.
So individuals who are concerned about this, the simplest thing for you to do is go to our website, which is educateusaction.org, and click on email your school board, which is one of the on the top menu. There's a little form that just asks like where you live, and we will look up your school board members and connect you with them, and at the same time send your school board members a guide to not just why they should advocate for sex ed on the school board level, but also how.
Mm,
And so it's so easy for you. We do the hard work on the back end. And your school board members don't get emails from their constituents all day long about a bunch of issues the way that your Congress people do. And so one email, or you can get your friends to do it, 5 emails from the same
mhm.
district, really makes a difference in terms of
Right.
prioritizing this issue. So that's the first thing. It's educateusaction.org. But if we're talking about politicians, people with power, I just want them to grow a backbone. Like, I would genuinely love them to look at our data
Mm,
and try it out. Just like try saying something about sex ed
right.
at your next town
And
hall,
see what happens.
right? Like next time you're on the doors and see what happens. I promise you it's popular. We one of the things we do at Educate Us is endorse and support school board candidates around the country. So certainly
Mhm.
if you know anyone running for school board who you think would
Right.
be a great addition, send them our way.
Hmm.
But I was talking to a candidate, India Palencia in Florida. She's running in the district that includes Fort Myers, which is like the cradle of Moms for Liberty.
Hmm.
And I was talking with her the night before we released the polling. And so I was like, I'm going to give you a little preview of the polling. And she was like, this is so interesting because I just went into a Republican area of my district to an event there. And some guy came at me about trans kids playing sports.
Hmm.
And I stood my ground and I said what I meant. And the crowd turned on him. And
Mm,
I'm very surprised.
hmm.
And I just think that people aren't trying it out because they don't have social proof that they're in the majority. Right. So,
I
like,
think that's true. I think there's so much sensitivity and concern about the environment overall.
everyone thinks it's more polarized than it is. Our pollster Voss, who did the initial polling for us, shared with me some polling that showed if you ask people right before the Super Bowl who they're rooting for, it's about 50-50. And if you poll after the Super Bowl, who were they rooting for, it's like 80% the winning team. So
That's
most
funny.
people just psychologically
Yeah.
know they're in the majority. They want to know
Right.
the winning team. So for everyone listening, a thing you can literally do is just talk about your support for trans inclusive sex ed
Right.
whenever there's an opportunity to, and
Yeah.
make people feel more normal about it.
And honestly, I think getting young kids uh, engaged, thinking about these issues, again, to go full circle to the idea of civics, because we have
Yeah.
such an issue with civics. I mean, they're really, I think, I mean, I know it can be awkward in families to be talking about sex, but talking about sex ed is different, right? Talking about
Yeah.
schools, school cultures, students, those environments. And so I'm going to close by saying thank you for all of this work. Thank you for joining us today. And is there anything that you would like to close with, in addition to telling people where to find you, yourself, and Educate Us, which you sort of have done, but just to recap.
Sure. You can find Educate Us everywhere on socials at Educate Us Action, although not on X because we're not there.
Mm.
And you can also find us at educateusaction.org. You can find me at Jaclyn Effable on Twitter, although not on Twitter, I'm not there anymore. On Instagram, although also I don't post that much on socials myself. You can also go to jaclynfriedman.com. The thing I want to leave people with is just like the sense that we are a strong majority on this issue.
Mm.
This is an issue that not only could we be winning on if enough people started just speaking up,
Mm-hmm.
but also would affect so many issues that people already care about. So like
That's
if
right.
you care about LGBTQ liberation, if you care about reproductive justice, if you care about ending sexual violence,
Racial
so many
justice.
things.
We
What?
didn't really talk about the intersection with racial justice.
Look, if you want
Yes.
to use community dependent on police, teach young people how to resolve their differences in a peaceful, healthy manner.
Right.
That's taught in sex education. Like so many issues that you care about, this is the foundation for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an issue that everybody already agrees on. So like all we have to do is start projecting what is true, which is that we are the majority.
Right. That is an excellent close. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. And we hope that you share this, think about it, take some of the action steps that Jaclyn discussed. And we're going to sign off here. And again, thanks for joining WMC Live Talks.